Good evening, spiritual warriors. Welcome to program Spiritual Warriorship, where we hear from, read from, discuss books by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who has a series, 16, 17 now. We are working here on this particular program for over 2 years now, going into the spiritual warrior books to help us know the battleground is consciousness and the weapons are love, humility, caring. Tonight, April 1st, 2011. And this is not April Fool joke, this is real. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami's teachings and guidance are real. We are reading from Spiritual Warrior 4. Tell you why I went back there. Subtitle, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. Now last week we completed chapter in Spiritual Warrior 5 on mindfulness. And what I realized in looking through the table of contents, we have tackled, heard, discussed, read from all but one chapter in Spiritual Warrior 5. Now let me tell you about this. If you don't have the books of Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, so you can follow along with us, or even read on your own, or get back to points that may have impressed you, they can be purchased at Krishna.com or through the publisher at harinamapress.org. They're wonderful guidebooks for spiritual advancement, growth and advancement. So when finished with the need for constant mindfulness, and we had been through, I don't know how long many of you have been with us, but the chapters we covered in 5, internal dialogue, click in anything? The importance of short-term goals, an attitude of gratitude, necessity of enthusiasm, and the need for constant mindfulness. And we did also look at the perfect escape, how to escape the abode of misery. So that's quite a few. And I said, and that book was entitled Making the Mind Your Best Friend. But when I asked for guidance of where to go this time, I was brought back to Spiritual Warrior 4. There are a few chapters in there we have not tackled yet. And what I found, I wanted to make a little note. In the beginning, the editor's preface states that the information presented in these pages, this is Spiritual Warrior 4, is extremely rare. And we hope you make the most of the knowledge they contain. And if you take these teachings seriously, they can transform your life into a most sublime, loving adventure. And if you've been around a while, whenever I get ready to go to a new book and a new chapter, I call it an adventure because it's an adventure for me. I have read these books in the past. Now this book was published 2004. So some of the information, the first printing was 2004. Some of the information may be more updated on some of the subject matter, but when he gets to the essence of it, this is it. But he has a point in his preface. The author himself wrote a preface for this book. He said that Spiritual Warrior for Conquering the Enemies of the Mind and Spiritual Warrior 5, Making the Mind Your Best Friend, they were written at the same time. And they're distinct books that stand on their own. But if read together, they complement each other even more than the previous books in the series. And then he tells us that he spent about 55% of his ministry at that time was in connection with his own Vaishnav communities and institutions around the world. And the other portion of his work is teaching in connection with international business, medical, and interfaith communities. His special area of interest, he stated then, involves helping leaders to be more authentic and helping spiritualists of all faiths to rise above stagnation and blocks in order to be more truly help themselves and their communities. So what he did, he said, after recently when he finished a 45 country tour, what he found, many of the issues that are in 4 and 5 he had to address. And he wanted to make some of the material available in simple written form to help people overcome their anarthas, obstacles, blocks, and stagnations. I saw that in all of these communities, people were getting stuck and were often experiencing intense mental suffering. As I have been praying to be more of a global change agent in assisting people with their suffering, Spiritual Warrior 4 and 5 are offered in this spirit. So, we've been through quite a few chapters in 4. Remember any? Raise your hand, I can't see it. One was what? Avoiding anxiety. And I'm not going back. You got to go get the book. You wish you could remember it. But avoiding excessive anxiety. He doesn't tell us there's going to be some anxiety, but he talks about excessive anxiety. Remember we did choosing love over fear, how important love is in our lives, and how to really see love, what it means. Oh, I found it. Somebody asked me about when he spoke about the evil dog and the good dog. I think it's a Chinese.
Native American.
Huh?
Native American.
Native American. Thank you. Story. That the dog you feed the most, is that the one you feed the most is the one that stays attached. So we don't want to be feeding fear now. It's more about love. And remember managing anger? I think we spent weeks on that one, but so many techniques, technologies to help us work through. So what are we addressing this evening in Spiritual Warrior 4? Coping with depression. Chapter 5. Spiritual Warrior 4. Now remember, all of these chapters, they were lectures given by Bhakti Tirtha Swami in wherever he was at the time. They were transcribed and then put into books. So let us begin. And what I feel to say is, and I've noticed through reading through his books these years, he doesn't let you hide. You don't need to hide. You don't need to stick your head in the sand. This is the situation. This is how it's acted out, played out by individuals, may even be you. But once he puts the picture in front of you, so you can honestly say, yeah, that's me, or that's how I feel, or that's how I act, or that's what I do, he then starts giving you techniques, technology, scripture, quotes from scripture, Zostra quite a bit. And I'm encouraging you, when I read a verse or a text that he has given, try to mark it down and go back and study it, or read the purport if it has one by Srila Prabhupada. Because this is about moving ahead, getting out of stagnation spiritually. And that's what we need in these lives and times. And as I'm going to go through what he says about depression, just remember, as I said, he always gives us the techniques, technologies to move ahead. And that's what he does here. And we may not get to it tonight, but we will get to it because he has a section called Healthy Ways to Cope with Depression. And he also has a whole section with 32 ways to cope with depression. So, but we need to be mindful. There's that mindfulness again of what's going on or what we may not be paying attention to in ourselves or what we're seeing in others. And then we'll find ways that we may be able to help ourselves and help others. So we begin Chapter 5, Spiritual Warrior 4, Coping with Depression. And he opens the chapter with a sastric verse. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 25, Text 18, and I'll just read the English. I did practice Sanskrit today, but then when I'm looking at you face to face, eye to eye, I'll give you the English. When one's higher awareness fails and finally disappears, and one is thus unable to concentrate his attention, his mind is ruined and manifests ignorance and depression. You should understand this situation to be the predominance of the mode of ignorance. And this is Canto 11. That's Krishna talking to Uddhava. I didn't, tell you truthfully, go and look it up and break it down, because usually I do that, but somehow today I didn't. And he opens with another, he gives us another verse. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 12, 3, 30. Canto 12, Chapter 3, Text 30. When there is a predominance of cheating, lying, sloth, sleepiness, violence, depression, lamentation, bewilderment, fear and poverty, that age is Kali, the edge of the mode of ignorance. The age of Kali is the age of quarrel, confusion, and ignorance. Is mentioned in many, many religious texts as a time of great sin and darkness. Increase in depression is a sign of a rapidly deteriorating civilization and an extremely frustrated and disappointed citizenry. He gives us some research he does here. After extensive research, the World Health Organization, and how I'm saying these figures he's quoting here goes back to 2003 or earlier, because the book itself was published 2004. So don't go look it up on Google and say those figures are wrong. I'm telling you ahead how these figures are coming at you now. And the main point is to see what he's presenting us a picture, so that we can then get to the guidebook to hopefully solve some of the solution problems in the picture and in ourselves. Okay? So he's talking about the World Health Organization reported on the condition of mental health around the world in 2001, World Health Report. And they estimated that 450 million people on the planet have a mental or behavioral disorder. Furthermore, depression is now a leading cause of disability around the world. And among the 10 leading causes of the global burden of disease, it ranks fourth. The World Health Organization estimates that in the next 25 years, depression will move up the list to become the second leading cause of disease. And they also report that 1 million people commit suicide every year, and between 10 and 20 million make an attempt. Now, many elements can contribute to mental illness, such as biological, psychological, and social factors. Depression can stem from a person's increasing dissatisfaction with their husband, wife, children, politicians, religious leaders, educational institutions, themselves, and so on. Even the attachment to materialism will create many problems. All these sources of disappointment lead to stress, anxiety, frustration, and gloom. Now, by understanding the effects of mental disturbances on the consciousness, we as spiritualists can more effectively assist people who suffer from some of these problems. Understanding the effects of mental disturbances on the consciousness. It is also important for us to know how to help our families and ourselves. The spiritual warrior must protect the healthy and serve the wounded. In order to equip ourselves, we will examine mental illness, and specifically depression, from a biological, physiological, psychological, and of course, a spiritual perspective. Now, we know in the scriptures there's a verse that says, this is Bhagavad Gita 7:16, O best among the Bhartas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Only one out of these 4 types of people actually seeks knowledge of God. The others come to the process of devotional service out of curiosity, distress, or a desire for wealth. The majority of people turn to God when they have issues in their lives, which means that they basically approach God because they want Him to remove their material distress and obstacles. Huh? Sounds familiar. Enabling them to enjoy or at least suffer more peacefully. However, the most evolved devotees of the Lord are not just interested in orthodoxy. Rather, they are interested in understanding the highest level of transcendence. Actually, this frustration with the material world is often one of the amazing qualities that brings a person into devotional service or serving God. Now sometimes a person just does not fit in or is considered dysfunctional according to the so-called normal standards of material society. I've met a number of devotees through the years who would express that feeling. They just didn't feel they belonged. And they didn't want to eat meat and like do all the things their family was doing. And they were considered cuckoo. What's wrong with this person? Although this inability to comfortably function in the material world may appear as a disqualification to the expert materialists, it can actually act as a catalyst by pushing the person closer to devotional service and to God. If they're not frightened by what they're getting fed from the outside. Because the trend is if you're not acting like what's considered normal, then they think something is wrong with you and you're probably the one who's heading in the right direction. However, it is unfortunate for the person and the devotional community if the person ultimately does not connect more deeply with transcendence, because the dysfunctional qualities that caused him or her to feel or possibly act inappropriately in the material world can also cause him or her to remain dysfunctional in the devotee community. Now, in a spiritual community, devotees of the Lord definitely have certain social and spiritual etiquettes, as well as specific requirements. Though we might have enough sukriti or pious credit to move towards God, our progress could stop at this initial level if we do not sincerely work on ourselves. Almost every reading, every book, he always comes to that point. We must work on ourselves. Disgust, disappointment, and intense anxiety may help in bringing many to seek the Lord's shelter. But if the seekers do not fellowship properly or have their expectations fulfilled, they will develop even greater grief and depression. Many seekers of God who come to devotional life felt such a disturbance with their environment that they even contemplated suicide. They deeply felt that life must have a higher purpose. But since they could not find or experience this higher meaning, they considered life to be meaningless and did not want to stay around. In past workshops and at temples in Europe, Africa, Australia, Malaysia, Russia, and America, when I asked how many members of the audience have contemplated suicide at some point, almost 1/3 of the devotees in each class raised their hand. Either they thought about it or had plans to follow through. In few cases, some were about to commit suicide when they saw the devotees or noticed a spiritual book on a shelf that seemed to jump out at them. Others had dreams in which they saw a devotee or their present spiritual mentor, and then the next day they actually physically saw the devotees or had some then powerful dream experience manifest. Sometimes the consequences sometimes the circumstances are so dynamic that God personally intervenes just as the person prepares to end their life. This sometimes happens because the level of intensity in a person's consciousness invites the Supreme Lord to intervene. The intensity in a person's consciousness invites the Supreme Lord to intervene. It is not the contemplation of suicide that elicits God's connection, but it's the frustration, intensity, and determination. Some of us remember a certain point in our lives when we just prayed and cried intensely for help or guidance. And then the Lord seemed to come forward more. And this led to a shift in our lives. He was always there. But our intensity moved us closer to the help that He was always providing. Hope you get to hear that. The Lord was always there. But our intensity moved us closer to the help that He was already providing. So we're really, the expression goes, we're really never alone. But it's the intensity and the determination to know God that He Himself seems to present Himself to help you. He tells a story here of an incident that occurred in many years ago in relationship to this topic in an ashram in America around 1969 in New York. There was a Bhakta, Steve, who began coming to the temple in New York City. And he was rather unusual and a little offensive. He was trying to practice Bhakti Yoga. However, at some point, Bhakta Steve stopped coming. Prabhupada, the guru and founder, noticed this and inquired from his devotee students, "Where is Bhakta Steve?" One of the devotees explained to Srila Prabhupada that Bhakta Steve had committed suicide. Prabhupada then became very grave and tearful. He started speaking aloud in a prayerful state, addressing the Lord. He said, "Dear Krishna, wherever this boy is, please let him immediately come back in the family of a devotee." He also said that Krishna sent them a soul to care for, but they had not given sufficient care. Therefore, this entity, experiencing such frustration in all environments, both secular as well as spiritual, took his own life. How compassionate Srila Prabhupada was. Now, sometimes people come to the devotional community because of their troubles with regular secular life. However, if they find that the devotional community is not sufficiently supportive, they will feel, "I am suffering in the material life, and now I'm trying to take shelter of godly people. But even here I see so much arguing, politics, hypocrisy, and impersonalism." The person may leave the environment or want to commit suicide. When someone leaves the environment, it is most unfortunate, because once a person has had a connection with transcendental knowledge, his or her life will never be the same. When devotees leave their spiritual connections, they become almost like ghosts, because they will not feel satisfied with the mundane materialists. And they also do not feel satisfied with the spiritualists. It is as if the person has no identity. We should not wish to try. We should not wish that situation on anyone. Therefore, we have a responsibility to try to create an environment in which people feel good about their devotional commitments and can make advancements. And when they do have problems, hopefully those in their environment can help bring them out of their particular problem. How is this going? How many in the chat room? Are there any in the chat room?
Yeah, Puvanoha and Shruti.
Oh, bless you. Welcome to the chat room. Okay. He deals here with types of depression and causes of depression. And then he goes to the dark night of the soul. All right. I'll just continue because this is what I've been brought to, and there's something for everybody. And if it's helping us to hear and maybe help ourselves and definitely understand what may be going on with others and how to keep our spiritual community environment at a higher level, bring it to a higher level. So let's look at types. That's short. Now he says the different types of depression usually include unipolar and bipolar, although bipolar is sometimes confused with unipolar. Unipolar depression occurs when someone feels seriously unmotivated, full of sadness, emptiness, and distress for months or even years. Such a person feels hopeless and sees no way to get out of their misery. They often lose their desire to eat, talk, socialize, or even bathe. Some people have fallen into such deep states of depression that they will stay in a dark room for months or not take a bath for weeks. Some of us have known people who have gone through these states. Even in their own lives, when we undergo a seemingly negative situation, even in our own lives, when we undergo a seemingly negative situation, we may feel so miserable that nothing seems to give us pleasure. We have all had these low ebbs, huh? A death in the family, a divorce, or serious illness can all lead to states of depression. These are very traumatic periods, and as a matter of fact, many people who develop cancer do so after such traumatic events in their lives, such as death, divorce, or loss of a job, because the mind continuously sends distressful and aggressive messages to the organs of the body. A person with bipolar or manic depression has a dual nature. In this condition, people will fall into such a deep depression that nothing seems capable of getting them out or stimulating them. However, they will at other times shift into sudden manic states in which they do not sleep because become excessively active and have grandiose feelings. Some people with this condition even go days without sleeping due to this maniac tendency. We might know of people who have had this experience, or maybe we had it ourselves. Actually, millions of people experience these intense mental states already. And in the next 10 to 15 years, these mental challenges will increase at a drastic rate. People are having more trouble dealing with the material energy and disappointments in their lives. Any questions or comments? Just no. Just the two people there.
Mohini's in the chat room right now.
Mohini. Our Mohini? Oh, welcome. Okay, what I'm going to do, 837, he gives us a list of causes of depression. And since we're learning from the teacher, we may think we know these, but let's see what he tells us. Because, as I said, he's going to give us ways to work these things out. He calls one psychosomatic illnesses. He says we want to look at psychosomatic illness which directly develops from the mind. In certain instances, a person's mind literally causes them to experience a disease or causes them to repress the symptoms of a particular type of sickness, even to the degree of paralysis. Psychoneuroimmunology is a medical and psychological science which studies the influence of the mind on the body. What does this topic have to do with depression? Actually, psychosomatic illness illustrates the power of the mind and are important for us as we try to understand depression. Actually, as spiritualists, we already have a deep understanding of the workings of the mind. Even Arjuna, remember in Bhagavad Gita, he acknowledged that controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. And if you remember, Krishna agreed with him. We understand the process of thinking, feeling, willing, which leads to action. If we repeatedly maintain certain thoughts in our minds, they will eventually turn into words and then into action. You know, is one of the qualities of a spiritual warrior in the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior in Spiritual Warrior 3, the first is sense control and mastery of the mind. I just think maybe we need to go over that again, but he breaks down how that mind functions and how we can have mastery over it. So the mind, he reminds us, is always engaged in sankalpa or vikalpa, or acceptance and rejection. Just as a vacuum cleaner picks up the dust on the floor, the mind also has this tendency. Sometimes it will pick up other people's thoughts, and sometimes it will pick up characteristics or reflections from the environment. Every environment has a different type of atmosphere. A bar, an office, a church, a temple, all have distinct atmospheres because the thoughts of people project certain consciousness and unconscious elements into the atmosphere. My mind is going back to that concept of that he gave us of mindfulness. One must be mindful wherever they are, walking, talking, wherever. Then you can become alert and conscious of the environment you're in. And based on your studies and understanding, you can master that mind from accepting that particular, especially if it's negative, in environment or atmosphere. Some of these environments will even leave us feeling drained after prolonged association, but some environments will uplift us. And I'm sure you've had that experience. You go somewhere and you come out and you say, oh, I feel exhausted. And you remember some of the conversations you had or whatever. The placebo effect also helps us understand the influence of the mind. Anytime doctors or researchers test a medicine, they must also test it in conjunction with the placebo effect. This means that when a group of people receive the actual medication, others will receive an imitation pill. Then the doctors evaluate the people who took the genuine medicine as well as those who took the fake pill. Interestingly, many people who received the imitation pill actually improve. Of course, this information bewildered many doctors, but now it's understood that the release of endorphins provides one explanation for this improvement. Endorphins are chemicals in the body that act as a natural mood elevators and painkillers. A person's thoughts can trigger the release of these chemicals, thus influencing the physical body.
There's a question. There's a question.
There is a question? 1 second. Okay.
Mohini Murti asks, what if we have an uplifting environment, but because of lack of control of mind, we still remain in a place of darkness?
Then you take responsibility for mastering the mind. And then you get Spiritual Warrior 3, chapter 12 Qualities of a Spiritual Warrior, and read about mastering the mind. Yeah, if that's why mindfulness is so important. You see, you can tell, you're okay right here, and then you get in this environment, and then you're all kind of crazy, or the mind is going crazy. You look and you realize, let me check myself. What happens when I go in there? Where does my mind go? How far do I let it go? When do I bring it back? When do I tell it I won't take this anymore? There's some responsibility on our part, Mohini. Mindfulness, we've gone through, I've just realized all the things we've covered, but that chapter on mindfulness, if you can just practice that on a daily practices. He tells us that, I hope that's okay, dear, the placebo effect is not just an imaginary concoction. Since people think they are taking medication, the mind influences the body to release endorphins and genuinely help improve the person's condition. So you're feeling fine, you get up that day, you're going along, and you get to the school door or the office door, and somebody says, what's wrong with you? You don't look right. Why are you wearing that old thing? What do? You either just say thank you for your kind words, or thank you for expressing yourself, and keep on going, knowing you're fine, you look fine, and what you have on is fine. Or do you let the mind start? And it can wear you out, and I'm sure you know what I mean. So it's at that moment, it's truly our responsibility, our mindfulness, to notice whatever's coming at us and how the mind, direction the mind wants to go in. He says some years ago he spoke at a yearly convention for the National American Medical Association, and he discussed how the neurotransmitters send messages throughout the body. When we feel annihilated or unloved, it affects the mind. More specifically, it activates the neurotransmitters, which then send messages throughout the whole body and consequently cause an attack on the cells and organs in our body. Many diseases actually develop due to the mind's frequent attacks on the cells and organs in the body. The mind has that kind of power. Conversely, when a person feels cared for and loved, their physical and psychological immune systems actually get stronger. Love literally heals, protects, and gives longevity, and a lack of love literally kills. When someone feels annihilated or unloved, they may fall into a depression or carry around some type of neurosis and psychosis. Many times the person will begin to experience various physical ailments that correspond to the mental state. If anybody online is in the Alachua, Gainesville area of Florida, we're going to be doing a book study at the Bhakti House at Krishna House, near Krishna House, on April the 9th, and we're starting with Spiritual Warrior 2, Transforming Lust into Love. So if you're in the area, do try to come by and participate in this program. And the first chapter is the School of Love. I love it. I wish I could memorize that whole chapter. But he goes on here. Since 1995, the Harvard Medical School has annually held conferences focusing on spirituality and healing in medicine, which has drawn over 2,000 professionals annually to discuss issues relating to both the mind and body. Such conferences indicate the increasing recognition that health professionals are giving to the mind's influence on the body. Research continues to show that those people who maintain a sense of spirituality heal much better. Not only do they seem to have faster ongoing mental challenges, but they also seem to exhibit many physiological benefits such as longevity. Of course, some people claim it helps simply because the practitioner believes that it will help them. In these cases, even if one believes it works, it will work. Therefore, even on the material level, a healthy sense of spirituality has emotional and psychological benefits. What to speak of its ultimate spiritual benefits, huh? So I want to stop there, and those last lines, if that on a material level, a healthy sense of spirituality has emotional and psychological benefits. what to speak of its ultimate spiritual benefits. And those of us who have been brought to this ancient Vedic teaching philosophy and have been given the holy name, or how to get closer to God, see if you're not in a different physical condition than you were before you began studying. And then see what happens if you get so involved in the material energy that you forget. And then you realize, oops, something, I know I do. I can tell in a moment when I let my mind run off into something. So it's really to have a sense of spirituality, strong sense of spirituality. Read your sastras, care for others, be forgiving. And we're going to go through some of these points when we get to. I just want to take care of this so you have a sense, in case you don't, of depression or may not have paid any attention to it. And then how we're going to go into some really wonderful guidelines and guide points, healthy ways to cope. So don't let any of this, what you're hearing, depress you. Know you're gaining an insight of what maybe you may be experiencing or somebody around you is experiencing. But there are healthy ways to cope with it. And we're going to end there. Any comments, questions?
Mahi Mercy says, what if we, let's see. I always like to think that I can be strong enough in mindfulness to not get affected by the environment I'm in. But what I have found being truthful with myself is that I am very affected by my environment and people around me. And Bhuva Mohan says, thank you for another relevant lecture, and he offers his obeisances too.
Obeisance to you, Bhuvan Mohan. Thank you, Shruti. I talked to Murari Gupta today. We got to try and get a leadership book to the people. Thank you for your service of getting out what you did. And Mohini, mindfulness is important. And you can begin, you keep like a little journal nearby. And the minute you notice a shift, you write down what was going on when that shift happened. Somebody looked at you funny, somebody said something, and what did the mind do with that? And is it true? There's a lot of stuff we take and let the mind play with isn't even the truth about us. And as we're studying this teaching and getting to know who we are as eternal spiritual beings, less and less. So you take responsibility and not let that mind run off. The minute it starts, stop and write it down. Or say, I tell you the story I used to tell when many years ago I studied a practice called Science of the Mind. And it was about positive thinking and how to bring the mind from negative or something going on to something positive. But as I studied that, I would find myself going to work or whatever, and the mind would bring up its nonsense about whatever, and I would just shake my head. Oh no, I'm not going there. And then we had what we call affirmation, that you would put in what it is you want to experience or what thought you wanted to carry rather than that. You can do that. And the more you are putting that positive thought in or seeing what's causing the negative to come in and work on getting rid of that, you'll notice you will not allow the environment or what people say to disturb you. Now it may in the beginning, oh my gosh, but once you become mindful of what you have allowed in, then that mindfulness will turn you to higher and speaking higher, and something you've studied or something your teacher said of how to go to another level. And as we go through these books, and he has so many techniques and technologies, that's what you practice. So practice the mindfulness if you still have it or have the book or the notes of how to keep that mind at a higher level. If you keep it up there long enough, it'll get the message that it can't take you to a lower place. Okay? Much success. Keep working and practicing. And thank you, Bhuvan, for being there, and Shruti, and I have a silent majority out there. I'm not even going to call you a minority, but thank you for being there. And don't forget, if you have anything you want to say to me and you don't want to say it online, you can write me at Mother Indrani 108 at gmail.com. And I'll do my best to respond to you there. All right? So have a blessed week, and take care of yourself, and be mindful of your environment and the people around you. Any of these symptoms, maybe it's just a cry for love. And we all get so busy. Try to take time to be maybe a little more loving and caring to others, and you'll get it back. And any distress you may be feeling will be turned around also. All right? Hare Krishna. Krishna bless you all, and thank you for being there. And we'll see you next week. Hare Krishna.